Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it is going to remain very chilly over the coming days as we do see very cold air moving into Europe. Now at the moment we're not expecting to tap into the exceptionally cold air that is plunging into Northern Europe, but we are likely to be on the edges of that very cold air as we head into the weekend and the start of next week. So we're kind of in a bit of a middle ground scenario when we've looked at these long range forecasts over the past few days, and we can start to see that pattern evolving towards the end of the UKV run. Now it is a little bit different to some of the other runs we'll look at later on in the video, because it does actually have some of that very cold air just skirting down the east coast, which could bring the risk of some snow as we head into early next week. But I will reiterate, we're not expecting bitterly cold easterlies like some of the models were showing a few days ago. We're expecting something kind of in between, where it's cold but not very cold, perhaps a bit of winteriness, but nothing too widespread or disruptive. We'll then have a look at the long range forecast, continuing to look at the GFS, GM, ECMWF and the Ensembles, of course looking at what they are predicting. As I said a moment ago, most of the runs now are agreeing on that middle ground scenario, not seeing bitterly cold easterlies, not seeing mild southwesterlies, but a fairly stagnant southeasterly dry flow, bringing in cold but not very cold conditions as we do progress into the second half of February. It still could be very cold at the surface. Temperatures could still be very cold overnight, low single digits by day, but we're not expecting heavy significant snow at this stage, because we are generally going to be stuck under that high pressure block, never fully seeing those cold areas of low pressure coming in off the near continent. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now if we start on the live radar, we can start to see the battle starting to emerge across our shores. We've still got very cold air in place, and temperatures again today were really chilly, not getting much above the 3 or 4 degree mark. A bit of showery activity across northern England, a bit of snow over the higher ground, but mostly a little bit of mixing in rain. Precipitation more widespread, pushing into the western part of the Republic of Ireland. And again, this is the Atlantic influence trying to make itself known. Again, it's going to continue to push in over the next few days, have some success, but it will never fully unlock. And of course, those longer range charts we'll look at in a minute have reduced that unlocking into the second half, or the final week or so of February. Definitely seen, as I said, a bit of a drop off in those cold runs, bit of backtracking on that part, but also backtracking on the very mild part, all kind of moderating those two extremities to, as I said, a cold but not very cold scenario. Now as we look at the temperatures this evening, it's around 8 o'clock, and you can see widespread temperatures down towards the low single digits. Of course, milder further westwards you go, away from the cold source of air coming in off the near continent, but temperatures again down towards that freezing, maybe 1 or 2 degree mark. With thick cloud around, it's not quite as cold as it could have been with clearer skies. Now we've continued to look out to our north and east over the past few days, just to watch that exceptionally cold Arctic air moving in. And already tonight we can start to see more pinks and purples, which were more exclusively way out towards Russia or over some of the higher ground of Scandinavia. It's becoming a bit more widespread now across Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. And slowly this exceptionally cold air will drift further and further westwards and southwards. And at the moment, most runs have it stalling across Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, down towards Switzerland and the Alps, never fully pushing into France or the UK, perhaps skimming us at times, but never fully pushing in. Now we can see all of that on the latest UKV. You can see through the rest of this evening, we continue to see easterly winds, but coming up against that low pressure, trying to push in off the Atlantic. And again, those weather fronts out towards the Republic of Ireland continue to make some progress, but very, very slow. And for most of us, it's not really going to bring much precipitation at all. A bit of drizzle, a bit of thicker cloud through Friday into Saturday, and maybe bits and bobs of heavier rain further westwards. But into the weekend, the UKV, interestingly, has those easterly winds winning out once again for a very short period of time, and we can start to see snow showers coming in. Now, this is what could have happened widely if we saw a bitterly cold easterly flow. However, this is this battleground setting up. We've got exceptionally cold air coming in from the east, weather front Atlantic conditions trying to come in from the west, and we can just see this exemplified here by this weather front with clearer, drier air, but with snow showers to the northeast, more humid, cloudy, mild air to the southwest. And along that line of collision, we do actually see some heavy snow through the end of the weekend into the start of next week. And again, don't take this as gospel. This could all change very, very quickly depending on the setup of the high pressure, low pressure. Still got massive uncertainty even at the 3-day time frame, let's say the 5-day time frame. But just shows you, even if we don't see an exceptionally cold easterly flow, even with a bit of cold air in play, we could see a scenario like this develop potentially through the weekend and start of next week. And the easterly winds do win out for a short period of time into Monday, where it's very cold. But as I said, most runs don't have that very cold air streaming in off the North Sea. Instead, just slowly drifting in, getting nudged away and eaten away by Atlantic weather systems. Now, we can see why this is occurring. We've got the big block out to our northeast, easterly winds trying to push in, but low pressure out to our west, trying to pull in more west to southwesterly winds. And we're in this battle. And we can see it, as I said, exemplified by the upper air temperatures. Look at this. 4-5 degrees across the far southwest of England, southern Republic of Ireland, across East Midlands, northern England, eastern Scotland, minus 11 or 12 isotherm is moving, and that is bitterly cold. Now, most runs aren't getting the minus 10 isotherm in, but the UKV, probably the best, or at least most high resolution run we look at, is getting the minus 12 isotherm in. So exceptionally cold air coming up against very mild air, and this just again exemplifies why we've been having so many headaches and issues over the past few days, because just on this screen there's almost a 20-degree temperature contrast. We're just looking at the UK, we're not even looking at the North Atlantic in general, and again it exemplifies why it's so difficult to forecast the conditions at the moment. If you do look at the 2 meter temperatures, you'll see regardless of those upper air temperatures, it's going to be chilly and cold over the coming days. Into Thursday morning, potential frost in the north, where we see some clearer skies, and into the afternoon, once again, temperatures struggling around that 3 or 4 degree mark. Into Friday, more of a widespread frost developing with clearer skies, and by the afternoon, temperatures once again 3, 4, maybe 5. So cold, but not very cold. Into Saturday, another frost developing, and again with that Atlantic weather front trying to push in, does bring the risk of some winteriness. And at the moment, big contrast here on Saturday, 10 degrees in the far southwest, towards 2 or 3 further northwards and eastwards. And as we progress into Sunday, again we do see the risk of some snow, where with that precipitation does collide with the colder air towards the low single digits eastwards and northwards, milder further southwards and westwards. And this is really exemplified into Monday, very cold overnight temperatures there, and into the afternoon really struggling to get much above 1 or 2 in the east, 7 or 8 across the far southwest. But at the moment, UKV, at least for Monday, has the very cold air winning out. But we'll have to wait and see. Could very quickly shift into the coming hours. Now, I do just want to show you the UK Met Office EU run. We don't normally look at this, and it's basically because it's the same data as the UKV. It's just on a larger scale, and it goes out to day 7. But I just want to show you this just so we could carry on the end of that UKV run, see what happens to that very cold air. Now, if you continue, you can see that easterly flow, that slight easterly developing into the weekend. Look at that slight easterly bringing in that very cold air for a time. You can see the minus 10, minus 12 isotherm pushing in. And it looks like we could see a very cold easterly. But it doesn't make much progress. Just flirts and eventually runs out of intensity along the east coast. And we continue to see this battle between very cold air and very mild air, with a setup pretty much over the middle part of the UK. Now, further westwards, even under that milder air, it's still a chilly southeasterly flow, still dry air in play. So the temperatures probably won't be that mild, or won't be as drastically different as those upper air temperatures are. But it will still be a little bit milder, and you see that east to west contrast. So even with that slightly milder air mixing in, it still is likely to be cold next week. Just not expecting widespread snow at this stage. And of course, this UKV, UK Met Office EU run, is probably more of the optimistic runs with that colder air mass. Other runs do keep it further away. Now, do move over to the normal runs we look at. If we start on the latest GFS, we'll just have a look at those upper air temperatures today, because the pressure charts are fairly in agreement over the coming days. It's all about those slight positioning, but it all makes a massive difference to those upper air temperatures. As we head into the weekend, very different to the UKV already. By Sunday, it has got very cold air close by, but it's towards Denmark or eastern side of the North Sea. The minus 5 isotherm is flirting with our east coast, not the minus 12 isotherm. So already a 7 degree temperature contrast there, at day 4/day 5. Again, giving us some headaches. Beyond that, we do eventually see the milder air winning out, but we don't see an Atlantic onslaught like the GFS has shown the last day or two. It's more high pressure dominated, so it probably would remain chilly. And actually, towards the end of the run, it does pull in a potential bitterly cold easterly. Nothing too long lasting, but it does eventually build it in. And right towards the end of the run, we remain under higher pressure all the way to the end of February. Again, we're not looking very cold, we're not looking very mild, but we would be looking at is pretty chilly for much of next week, potentially turning milder more towards the double digits later on into the final week of February, but it all depends on the high pressure, low pressure battle. At the moment though, as we see from the ensembles, most are favouring a dry, cold, but not very cold pattern as we do head into the second half of the month. Now, to compare to the GM, again, broadly very similar. That high pressure to our north looks amazing for blocking, amazing for a very cold pattern, but it doesn't quite come off. And again, we're stuck in limbo, not seeing Atlantic flow, not seeing very cold air coming in from the east. And when this battle with a slight southeasterly flow into early next week, some cold air along the east coast potentially, some milder air further westwards. And if we look at the surface temperatures, again, you can see it's not particularly mild. Look at that, temperatures, low single digits, midday on Tuesday. And the same can be said into Wednesday and even Thursday. But it does turn milder from the west, and later on in the week, the mild air could win out. But by this point, we are looking at day 8, day 9, day 10, where there is massive uncertainty. And we've definitely seen a trend in the last day, or at least since yesterday's video, of that colder air along that east coast, that cold air that's flirting with us, but never fully, flooding in with an easterly, of that just hanging on a little bit longer. And if that does occur, then we could be looking at a potential colder week next week as the cold will just build on itself. Very stagnant air, still in winter months, so very possible to see a very cold pattern develop without seeing very cold upper air temperatures or snow or anything like that. It could be a really chilly, frosty, really miserable cold pattern setting up next week if this does occur, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, finish off by having a look at the latest ECMWF. Unfortunately, there's been some issues at ECMWF with generating the data, so we haven't got access to the midday run, so I have to look at the midnight run. And you can see very similar, that high pressure in limbo, right over the top, extending to our north, not pulling in westerlies, but not pulling in easterlies either, as we do progress into next week. Eventually, the Atlantic tries to win out, but we build another Scandinavian high. And we do see further risks of easterly flows before eventually it gets shoved away. So a definite trend today from the models. Yes, definitely away from a very cold easterly wind. Any beasts from the east like charts that were being shown through the weekend and last week. But we have definitely seen a transition towards is a cold in-between pattern. Not seeing those westerlies unlock, not seeing those easterly winds, just stuck under that blocking high, or at least with a strong influence for that blocking high, with dry, chilly, cold air at the surface, plenty of overnight frosts, and temperatures by day not getting much above the low to mid single digits. It's kind of that in-between pattern, not delivering wintry conditions where people like to see snow and things like that, and it looks really nice outside, wintry, things that happen a handful of times a year for some people, if that, especially for southern areas. And it's not the milder early spring-like pattern that other people like to see as we head into February with signs of that warmth in the sun. We're not seeing either one of those patterns. We're in this kind of in-between where it's not quite mild enough to be going outside and actually enjoying it. You still need to wrap up warm, but it's not cold enough to see wintry conditions and kind of get the positives of it being very cold, i.e. seeing snow and things like that, or at least in my opinion. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but it looks like it's going to be another one of these cold, but not very cold, and pretty miserable patterns developing if this high does stick around. And after you finish by looking at the latest ensembles, look at the latest midday, you can see there are some very cold runs still there, about 5, 6, 7, down from about 10 or 12 yesterday. They are reducing. They're not completely gone, but they are reducing. Majority hovering around freezing at 850 HPA, which is still chilly, still cold enough to give frosts. And of course, the biggest thing when looking at this is the dew points. Look at that, out to the 20th of February, the next 7 days, majority of runs keep the dew points below freezing, which indicates it's continental dry air. Even if those upper air temperatures do overtop it, we do see milder air coming in off the Atlantic. At the surface, it looks like those dew points are going to be very cold, which increases the risk of frost and potentially even inversion taking place as we do progress into that final half of February. Even beyond that, still quite a few keeping those very cold dew points. And what that leads to, if we look at the 2 meter temperatures, is a very slow increase. As I said, out towards the 20th, most runs still have us at 6-7 degrees at best. And that is an improving trend. Yes, it's the final week, maybe more towards 10 or 12. But at least for the next week or so, not looking at anything mild at all. And the same can be said from the latest ECMWF. Again, maybe slightly milder runs appearing, especially around the 20th to 22nd, more above that freezing mark. But it's very similar at the 2 meter temperature point. The next 7 days, not getting much above 4 or 5 degrees, and even those longer range, plenty of runs, still keeping it very cold, but there are those milder runs that are appearing. But definitely a trend away from that mild Atlantic onslaught arriving next week, getting pushed back by quite a few runs, and even some runs like the GFS today, completely ignoring that at all. So definitely seen those two extremities that have been pushed by the models. We're definitely seeing them decrease. The very cold runs starting to disappear. The mild, stormy Atlantic runs are disappearing. And we're kind of left with that in-between pattern, which I did say a couple of days ago I thought would be the eventual outcome. This kind of in-between, easily full at times, cold air flirting with us, but never fully dominating. And we see bits and bobs of wintriness, some very cold nights, some very cold days, but nothing too dominant and nothing too wintry. Still, things could adjust, and as we saw from the UKV, there is the possibility of even seeing some snow in a pattern like this. But it is going to be one to keep a very close eye on, and it all will depend on the positioning of that block. And I do not think we've got any confidence on the day 5 plus forecast, just because of the amount of uncertainty there is, depending on that high to our north. Do we see that EC flow slightly strengthened? Do we see it slightly weakened? We could see small adjustments like that, and it could make quite a big difference. So we'll wait and see. I'll keep you updated over the coming days. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.